Good morning, listeners. David Wright here, host of podcast Disruptive Innovators, Champions of Digital Business. Excited to say that this morning I am joined by Bashir Agboola. Bashir, great to have you on.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure and an honor. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, Bashir, tell me a little bit about your current role and where you're at right now.
So, I'm currently with the Hospital for Special Surgery, HSS. We are an academic medical institution focused on orthopedics and allied diseases. I've been with the organization for about 8 years now. I joined at the point when the organization was undergoing some significant transformation in its business. My role as a vice president and chief technology officer, I oversee infrastructure and operations, play a key part in developing and executing technology strategy and helping to make technology a key differentiator for the organization.
That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, if you're from New York, you definitely heard of HSS, right? I mean, you guys do amazing work to help our community. So,
Thank
uh,
you.
yeah, it's amazing that you've been a part of that for 8 years. That's impressive.
Thank you.
So we like to start out the podcast with a piece of actionable advice. What's one piece of actionable advice you could look to give our listeners today?
So I would say one of the things I've found valuable in my own development and my growth has been to always have what I describe as a learning agenda, meaning at any point in time, you should have a small list of things that you're focusing your learnings on and you're consuming information about that topic or topics. So typically, I would say 3 to 5 items should be on your learning agenda at any point in time. And I've found that to be very helpful because otherwise, it's being in a technology space in a top tier organization at the top of its field, you can get overwhelmed very quickly, very easily, and then you stop learning. So I found it very helpful to have a learning agenda, and I go deep on those topics and then move on to something else. So that has allowed me to continue to stay relevant, to continue to grow professionally, and to stay engaged and maintain my level of enthusiasm and interest in what I do. So I think having a learning agenda, and then I'll just tag on one bonus to that, which is, it's easy to get distracted by, in a very busy world, particularly when you live in a place like New York, when you work in a place like New York City, in an organization that's very busy, you can get distracted quite a bit and lose sight of what matters. So maintaining a sense of gratitude, I think, is important as well. Making that a core of one of the core values that each and every one of us subscribe to. I think it's important. So you keep learning and be grateful for what you have, even as you aspire for more. Because it's easy to lose sight of what you already have as you chase your ambitions. So that would be my advice.
That's such beautiful advice, and that resonates with me so much. About 6 to 8 months ago, we kind of reframed our vision and mission really to be of service in the world, right?
Mm,
Really come as opposed to coming from a place of how am I gonna get mine, right?
mhm.
Just how can I serve my family, my friends, my community, and the more that I get out of myself, the more that I can be grateful, right?
Yeah. And I think that, David, I'll just add, I think that's something that for many of us professionals, we come to that much later in life. But I would advise that, the earlier you come to those realizations and you start making those pivot, to use that overused word, pivoting, uh, the earlier we do that in life, the better. I would refer your listeners to Clayton M. Christensen's great book. How would you measure your life? And there's a TED talk out there by the late professor as well on that topic. So it's important that we make those conscious deliberations earlier on in life than much later when you are not so impactful. So congratulate you on that.
Yeah, I had to go through a life changing event, a number of years back in order come to that mindset. And I do wish I would have gotten there a little earlier, but the universe kind of guided me on the path that I'm on today. And, I have a beautiful life today. So I'm very grateful. I actually do a daily gratitude list. That's how I hold
Wow.
myself accountable. The
That's
few
great.
different guys, we just, yeah. So anyway, great advice. So Bashir, let's talk a little bit about your personal backstory. Where did you start out, and how did you get to where you are today?
So I'm originally from Nigeria. I was born in Nigeria. I began my professional career in Nigeria as well. I schooled there. I had my bachelor's degree in computer science with economics, and then I went on to study computer science at the master's degree level. I had the opportunity, after working in Nigeria for a few years, I had the opportunity to be employed by a company based in New Jersey. They facilitated my relocation to the United States. I worked in consulting with that company for a short while, starting out with one of their clients on Wall Street. From there, the consulting assignments took me into healthcare with Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. And from there, I transitioned to being a full-time hire at MSKCC, a great organization, one of the top cancer care organizations in the nation, if not in the world, and sort of stayed there for a long stint while I was there. Progressively promoted into larger and larger roles in the infrastructure and operations or technical resources division of IT, of information systems. Had the benefit of more education and professional growth while I was there. Added to my professional certifications. Had my MBA while I was there. Uh, I took advantage of the numerous opportunities that organization provided in terms of taking on bigger scope of responsibilities in terms of uh, education, training, leadership development programs, internally delivered professional development curriculum. I consumed all of those, and I learned quite a bit from people I interacted with, from people I encountered both in and outside of the organization, and that journey eventually led me to HSS, where I have been for a while now. And again, I've continued that growth trajectory, both in terms of my learnings, my development, and hopefully, my impact and contribution to what we do.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny. My wife immigrated to the United States from Latvia when she was 5, and she was talking about how you know important learning
Hmm.
was to them. That was their key to a bright future, and
Absolutely.
it really resonates with me. What was one of the most important things that you learned along that journey? And yeah, could you?
So there are many things I learned. So one of the well, but you asked for one of the most important ones. It's something that I wish I had known earlier. It seems very simple actually, but it's the fact that I needed to be comfortable with discomfort. So I've made it one of the teaching principles that I teach when I mentor up and coming professionals and young folks. It's getting comfortable with discomfort. And so what that means really is there are many things you need to do, and I'm talking about ethical, important things you need to do. I'm not talking about things that you shouldn't do. I'm talking about things you need to do that many of us, all of us, at some point or the other, feel uncomfortable doing. So for me, part of that would be having a conversation as we're having right now. Public speaking. It could be having a difficult conversation with a family member, with a subordinate, with someone that you work with having critical, crucial conversations that might be uncomfortable for all concerned, or going out of your comfort zone to learn something new, and being vulnerable and letting your guard down So for a while, I struggled with that, and I thought the way to address that was to get rid of the feeling of discomfort. I thought that, when I would see people that seemed successful at doing those things that I struggled to do, I thought perhaps they didn't feel the discomfort. I thought perhaps they were just braver, more confident, and what I needed to do was have more confidence and more courage. But it took a while, but eventually I figured out that I I was fighting the wrong battles. Rather than trying to get rid of that feeling of discomfort when you step on the stage to give that talk, or to have that tough conversation you need to have with a significant person in your life or with someone you work with. It's not about not feeling uncomfortable. It's about recognizing the discomfort and knowing that it's there, and actually using it as some sort of a fuel to do what you need to do. I'm going to have that conversation with you. I'm going to step up, go get introduced to that person I want to network with at the networking event that, this high ranking professional executive at some company that I'm interested in. I'm going to walk up to that person despite the knots in my stomach. And so my advice, what I've learned that I wish I knew much earlier, but I'm glad I still learned years ago, is get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So and I say to people, imagine if you were going to get a vaccine of sort, whether it's the flu vaccine or any vaccine. The wrong battle would be trying to not feel the pinch of the needle. You're going to feel the pinch. Could be a slight pinch, but you're going to feel it. So rather than focusing on not feeling the pinch, focus on the benefit you're going to derive from getting that shot. So in that case, it's protection from whatever you're getting the vaccine for. So get comfortable with discomfort, and when you assume that, you would notice very quickly that that discomfort actually dissipates fairly quickly. So if you're concerned about getting on the stage to talk, for the first several seconds, 1 minute, you're going to feel uncomfortable. And it could be almost a paralyzing fear in some cases, depending on the audience and what's at stake. But if you recognize that it's temporary, it's a fleeting experience, and it's going to go away, you're going to move forward and do what you need to do. And soon enough, that feeling would go. So if it's having a difficult conversation with someone you should have it with, a significant person in your life, your boss, um, a subordinate that you're having some challenges with, go ahead, have that conversation, recognizing that that feeling of discomfort you're having right now is only temporary. It will go away, and what matters more is the aim that the outcome you're trying to achieve. So that was so that was a transformational, as simple as it is, but for me, it was a really transformational self-discovery that's allowed me to do the things that don't come naturally to me. Many of the things I do today, for which I get compliments, are things that don't come to me naturally, but I've gotten comfortable with doing them, and now they seem comfortable to do.
Right. Yeah, I love that level of vulnerability. I tell the same thing to some of the folks that I mentor, um, when I walk on stage or when I'm approaching an executive like that. Of course, I feel discomfort or fear. Um, it for me, it's a little scary, but I can also be brave and have the courage to walk through it, and like you said, focus on the outcome, and also focus on that we're all just people, right? That person sitting across from me, or those folks in the crowd, they have the same human experience that I do. So
Yeah, and they want you to succeed. And more often than not, that executive actually would probably appreciate you approaching them. And many people are willing to help a lot more than we realize, if only we would reach out to them and allow ourselves to be vulnerable in asking for that assistance.
yeah, this is great. Before we get into your vision for HSS, and I want to talk about some of your initiatives, the technology. I really liked what you had to say about the learning agenda, and just quickly wanted to understand when you're putting that together, what are the mediums you typically consume? content. Are there any favorite books or blogs you've been reading lately? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I study broadly, books, podcasts, articles. I subscribe to a ton of articles and industry articles, publication. So the business school publications. I regularly consume those. Some recommendations I have, depending on where I'm at. So right now, I'll tell you where I'm at. One of my one thing I have on my learning agenda right now, as I think about the future, professionally speaking, given where I'm at in my career, in terms of and in terms of outlook. So I'm thinking, okay, I need to learn a little bit more about wealth management, and not because I've made the kind of money I would like to make, but you got to start somewhere. So I'm learning more now about. I said I need to be smart about managing money because that's what the wealthy in society have figured out much more than the rest of us. They know how to manage their money, or they've able to hire people to help them manage their money. So I'm listening to a podcast, a really great podcast on wealth management by Andrew Chen. It's called the Hack Your Wealth podcast. So it's really, I highly recommend the podcast by Andrew Chen. So you can find it on iTunes or other platforms. The one other thing I've had on my agenda for a while, and I've been at this for a few years now, is on biohacking. I'm sort of an enthusiast of biohacking. I consume a lot of content about how do you improve your health, all dimensions of your health as a as a person. And so one of the podcasts that I find most helpful in that area is Dave Asprey's The Human Upgrade. It used to be called the Bulletproof podcast. Now he just rebranded it as the Human Upgrade by Dave Asprey. Excellent podcast. There are a few other ones out there. On the professional side, there are a number of healthcare podcasts that I listen to. In terms of books, right now I'm on Audible because I do Audible quite a bit now because I take the train into to work, so it's just easier for me to listen while I'm in transit. So I listen to books mostly on Audible, and I listen to podcasts. The one book that I'm really listening to right now is Range by David Epstein, and it talks about just a book that talks about learning and developing expertise and how expertise is developed and challenging some of the understandings we have in terms of how people become good at what they do. So I find that very 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 interesting. But probably my best book recommendation, one book that I found most intriguing for of all the books that I've business books that I've read would be I think the Influencer, The Power to Change Anything by
Mm.
Kelly Patterson and a few other folks. They have a new edition out, and I think the subtitle to the new edition is something like the Science of Change. So
Hmm.
Influencer, the Science of Change. That's a new edition, but the original edition that I read, which I really found very interesting and very transformative, was Influencer, The Power to Change Anything. It's a really excellent book. It's about change because at the core of what we do, I like to think of what I do as being change management, being a change agent, right? That's what I do. What I do in my role as a technology leader is to use technology to implement change, to influence change, business change, help my organization to get to where it needs to get to. And much of what we do there involves changing attitudes, encouraging adoption, changing how we do business. So that book talks about change, what personal change, professional change, societal change. So I think it's a good book to add to your learnings. Change is a good influence, and change is a good topic to add to your learning, and that book is a really good one to use.
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally adding it to my repertoire here. I do same thing, Audible when I'm on the train, and or I got a Kindle because I sometimes I like to read as well and listen to classical music. I just had Andy Lodato on a week or two ago, and he just wrote a book, Fostering Innovation. It
Yeah.
talks about change a little bit and how to build an amazing IT team. Um, that's a good one to check out. And I love what you said about change because particularly when we work with large health systems or banks or really any industry. A huge part of what we do is organizational change management, right?
Absolutely.
Um, Enrolling the various stakeholders, especially when you get into organizations with 10, 15, 20,000 people, really having your arms around them
Mhm.
from a cultural standpoint, from a organizational standpoint is so crucial. So I'm going to check out that book for sure. Um, let's talk a little bit about HSS. So you're at HSS now. What's your vision for the organization?
So the so HSS, for those who might not be familiar with us, we're ranked number one in the nation and actually in the world in orthopedics. And
Wow.
that's a tough spot to be in. We are in the New York City area and in the tri-state area, New York and New Jersey, Connecticut, and Florida. But we cater to an international audience. We have people come from all over the world. And when you occupy the top slot in a particular uh, vertical, and you are in a marketplace like we are in the New York metro area with some really great healthcare institutions all around you, it's tough to be number one and to stay number one. We're ranked number one for the 12th year running now by US News and World Report. So that's a tough position to be in, and to maintain that leadership consecutively for that number of years, not only nationally, and then also more recently that it's measured globally. So to do that, those of us in non-clinical roles, because I'm not a clinician, those of us in non-clinical roles, we nonetheless have a big role to play in enabling the organization to deliver on its mission of, removing your pain and giving you mobility. I mean, literally, when you read patient letters, when you listen to patient letters, people that have been treated by HSS, you sometimes your eyes will tear up just seeing how grateful people are for the work that's been done to grant give them mobility, pain-free mobility, to be able to recover their quality of life that they thought was lost for good. So those of us in roles such as technology, we recognize the impact that we can have in making sure that the clinicians and everybody else in the organization in operations are able to do what's needed to treat the whole person that comes to HSS. So whether it's in laying out the technology infrastructure, or in enabling the rollout of new digital tools, because again, everybody's talking about digital transformation these days, and HSS is no different in that respect. So enabling the digital transformation of our business in different ways, and making sure that our clinicians and people in business operations have everything they need, as and making it as frictionless as we can, such that focus is on patient care and not on anything else that would detract from being able to really treat those people that come to us. So I see my role, my team, and everyone else that we work together with in IT. We see our roles as really not just enablers of the mission of the organization with technology, but we are also constantly thinking, how can we make technology a strategic differentiator for the organization? Because we are in a very competitive market space, and people have choices in this area. In the New York metro area, people have tons of choices. For them to keep coming back, we really need to differentiate our business. And so our goal is to make sure that technology helps with that differentiation.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. Leveraging technology to optimize that patient experience. I mean, that's a story that we're telling daily. So it's amazing that you guys are all over that. I mean, and congratulations about the ranking.
Thank you.
My mom is actually scheduled for a shoulder surgery at HSS. Um, my mother-in-law works at New York Presbyterian, and she set my mom up at HSS because of the level of expertise that you guys bring to the table.
Thank you.
Um, so what are some of the key initiatives that you guys are focused on right now?
So I'll talk more specifically in my direct scope. So one of the things we're focusing on this year is sort of mapping out core infrastructure migration, cloud migration. So a lot of focus on cloud has been on, you know, consuming services that are available in the cloud from a business application perspective.
Hmm.
We actually have most of our applications already in the cloud, and then we also started more thoughtfully a few years ago that new capabilities will be built in the cloud. So anytime we're building a new business capability, for example, when our analytics team were putting together their analytics strategy, that was all built around the cloud. So we decided that any net new capabilities in the organization was best to serve, just launching that in the cloud. And that's worked out well for us. So now, next step to that is looking at core infrastructure and saying, okay, what can we put in the cloud? What's the benefit? What's the business value to us
Right.
of putting more of our core infrastructure in the cloud? So this year, that's one of the initiatives that my team's working on, assessing that and making a determination for how we're going to begin to move some of our core infrastructure into the cloud. After we spent the last few years really transforming the infrastructure, because we that was key to what we needed to do over the last few years. Now the next phase for us is, okay, now we have very resilient, um, high tech core infrastructure. The next step for us is, let's look, can we move those into the cloud? So that's one thing we're doing. In terms of operations, also we're looking at AI operations, at IT operations backed with artificial intelligence. There are a new breed of technologies that's come out over the last I would say 3 to 4 years, that really are transforming IT operations. They makes managing your infrastructure a lot better and easier and more predictive. They make your service management experience gets a lot better. So some of those same technologies that have been used to improve performance in the business areas, robotic process automation is widely deployed now in many areas of business. In healthcare, one area is in revenue cycle management, because that's one area where there's just great opportunity to improve performance by using RPA. And then on top of that, you have AI ops is now also making its way into core technology infrastructure management. So we're looking at things like that as a way of maturing technology practice.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's great that you have the majority of your business applications in the cloud because that gives you the opportunity to, you know, plug those disruptive technologies in and create that interoperability and kind of optimize that workflow. So kudos. So that said, what are some of the biggest challenges you guys are facing as an organization today?
So the staffing is one
Yeah.
for core area. So in the cloud area, it's really difficult to find competent cloud engineers. So so staffing is one. In the cybersecurity area, again, in the data analytics, those three verticals are there. They're really difficult to find good talent.
Yeah.
So, and then on top of that is, the disruption caused by the so-called Great Resignation,
Hmm.
which I like to brand rather as the Great Shuffle, because in some ways it's a shuffle, because not everybody is retiring, and we do know that some people are quitting the workforce, but a lot of it is just shuffling. People are moving from one employer to the other for a variety of reasons. People moving out of the New York metro area, and people coming into the New York metro area maybe to a lesser degree. So it's more of a shuffle. So we have that challenge with resources, and the perennial challenges of being able to do more with what you have, And then in the healthcare space, in the last 2 or 3 years, and I wrote an article about this recently. We've had an infusion of money into digital health, into health tech, and so we have many upstarts in that space that are creating digital products, or digital enabled care models that are threatening to disrupt many of the legacy healthcare models that we have and healthcare institutions. Now, it's great, and I love that. It's because that's forcing everybody to digitally reinvent themselves, and so society will benefit from that. But in the interim, in the meantime, it's a disruption, because now you have many, and the pandemic also helped with that,
Yeah.
because adoption, things that probably wouldn't have gotten as much adoption as they've had, where it really launched. I was a couple of nights ago. I was at an event in New York City, organized by a company in the health tech space, where they brought investors and startup leaders in the health tech space together for just a small uh, networking opportunity. And many of the companies that I saw there were actually started during the pandemic. Many of the health tech companies. So because the pandemic really created an opportunity for them to launch and to gain traction a lot quicker than they would have done if this was 2018. So I think that's a challenge that many legacy healthcare providers are seeing, but I think it's a great challenge for the industry as a whole, for the healthcare industry as a whole, and for humanity, because it's going to make healthcare better.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, we're excited about it, and we're at the tip of the spear, right? I mean, historically, we've worked in healthcare, but now I would say, you know, almost 75% of our engagements are healthcare because of those reasons. And coupled with the fact that it's hard to find talent, it kind of benefits us. So,
Yeah.
um, but uh, so, one of the things I wanted to ask, I mean, you gave some great advice at the beginning of the podcast, but as it pertains to the team that you manage and your IT staff, what are some of the best practices that you follow, that you and your team follow?
Yeah, so some of it, I would say one of the things that we've learned from working during the pandemic was, we can actually do a lot better if we figure out how to collaborate better. Healthcare's typically been usually a team sport. If you've witnessed a procedure in an OR, it's a team sport, carefully choreographed team sport. I mean, that's how you would like it to be if you're the person on the operating table. You would not want it any other way, and that sort of resonates downwards throughout the organization. But in IT, we also learned to do that a lot better during the pandemic, because just given some of the challenges of not being co-located as we were previously, because now some teams had to go offsite and some teams remained on site, and having to work together, we actually became more collaborative, because we began to use more of the tools that were available to us previously, but which we did not use. So I think that's one of the lessons, one of the best practices that we've now adopted. Just taking advantage of the collaboration tools that we have to actually improve service delivery to our organization. And the other thing I would say is really promoting a culture of transparency and trust on teams, which would allow people to be open and vulnerable in discussing issues and in identifying issues. Because one of the things that causes dysfunction on a team is a lack of trust. If I don't trust that, by admitting that I don't know something, um, if I say I don't know how to do something, or that there's a problem somewhere, it's going to make them look down on me or question my professional credentials. Then that's a problem, and that
Yep.
eventually leads to dysfunction. So promoting, and this is more of a thing that's really, leaders everywhere need to focus on. We need to promote a culture of trust on our teams, so that people can learn to be vulnerable, and then, at the same time, learn to hold ourselves accountable. So when I come at you, David, for not delivering on something that you had committed to deliver on by yesterday, you would know where I'm coming from. I'm not doing that in a adversarial manner. I'm just
Right.
asking as a team member, David, you promised to have this to us, today, so we can do something else. So we don't have it. What's going on? How can we help you? So just promoting that. And I think promoting that kind of a culture, as hard as it can be to do, is important. It makes us work a lot more efficiently and much more successfully than if we operated in an environment that's devoid of trust and where everybody's sort of like doing CYA all the time, and then a lot gets missed and hidden, and it's just not good for your organization. So I think those are probably some of the lessons and practices that we've developed over time.
Yeah, and I would agree. I mean, especially right now with the issues with talent and IT, I think creating a great culture for an organization, really even outside IT in any department, I think is crucial to get talent and then and keep talent.
Right.
Um, so now we typically ask about disruptive technologies. I know that. Uh, we had talked about enterprise blockchain. Could you maybe tell me a little bit about your thoughts and surrounding that?
Yes. So this is one of those topics that have been threatening disruption for a while, but haven't exactly disrupted industry just yet. But it's I still believe firmly that there's a great deal of promise in enterprise blockchains, and again, not to be confused with crypto and Bitcoin, because people get those mixed up sometimes.
Right.
So enterprise blockchains have applicability in industries, and particularly in healthcare. And I'm a member of the HIMSS healthcare blockchain task force, whose goal is to help develop um, some of the learnings and understandings around health use of blockchain in healthcare and eventual adoption and possibly influence policy as those get developed. There isn't a ton out there yet in terms of practical applications in production. There are few, but there are a lot of efforts going. There's a lot of effort going on in many areas. So some of the areas that we've looked at is solving the interoperability problem. That's a perennial thorn in our sides in healthcare. Being able to make sure that data is available at point of care across so that providers can have the longitudinal view of a patient irrespective of where they go. In the United States, we're notoriously backward in that compared to some of the other advanced economies in terms of interoperability. So blockchains hold some promise there, as in revenue cycle management as well. And that's why a few years ago you saw a few uh, organizations came together. I think Optum, Humana, and a few other big names came together to do some work around the use of blockchain in I think in the area of credentialing. That's another one, which is a difficult one because practitioners have to be credentialed. And we have this system in the United States where it's not just do it once in one place and it's done everywhere. Different states have different requirements. Just again, one thing that blockchain's been looked at in the area of drug counterfeiting, solving the problem of drug counterfeiting, and so there are many applications, and today there are many projects working on solving problems using blockchain technologies. Many, again, as I said before, few of them are in production, very few, but over time we will see them mature. We'll see adoption. So I wouldn't say it's disrupting anything just yet, but the potential to do so remains real. Again, identity again, management is another key focus area for blockchain in the enterprise.
Got it. Yeah, and I mean, we'd like to ask about where you see the healthcare industry going in the future, and or what you think are the biggest opportunities providers. other than blockchain? Any other, thoughts on, on that?
Yeah, so I think digitally enabled care, as vague as that might sound, is really the future. Digitally enabled care, which allows us to bring care to meet people's care needs at where they are. We're changing the model. If you for those who grew up, for the older generation who grew up in the United States and maybe in some of the Western societies, where the uh, physician will visit you at home to take care of you. That was the model they used maybe 100 years ago. A doctor would make house visits and take care of you at home. And then we went to this centralized model where you had to go to the physician, you had to go to a big hospital, you had to go. So with technology, we're seeing an opportunity to take care to people where they are. And so, as I mentioned before, many upstarts, many startups are coming up in creating the technology, and legacy providers are also changing and also creating digitally enabled care models. The policies and payment models are trying to catch up to make sure that there's the reimbursements available, for those kind of care delivery models. So I think using technology to improve care, and then also probably most importantly, being able to care for the whole person and focusing on wellness above care, taking care above treating illness. I think it's a big shift because now with the uh, wearable technologies that we have and with the potential for improved access to care, you can actually, I have a smartwatch, I have a smartphone. Some of my vitals are being captured constantly. There are a number of wearables that I can put on to keep track of some conditions that I might have. That's allowing proactive care. We can then say, what, this person, given what the kind of data we're measuring and we're seeing in from all the wearables that they have a potential for blah 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 blah, and then here's what we can do. It's really, I think the future is great. The marriage of technology and healthcare, it's really great future for us as consumers of healthcare. And at the same time, it can help us address the inequalities that exist in access to care. Now, we have to be careful because technology is not equally accessible just yet. But if we address the digital gap while at it, we can also use this to sort of smoothing out some of the inequalities that exist today in our society as far as access to care and well-being is concerned. So those are some of the things, my thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree with all that wholeheartedly. I don't even have anything else to add. Um, so we're almost complete here. I just, if you, our last question is, if you could go back 5 or 10 years in time, what advice would you give your younger self?
I think there's a line that I heard years ago. I forgot who said that line, but I'm sure it's somebody out there said. He said, "Don't sweat the small. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff." So I'm not sure who said it. It sounds glib, but I think really it's important that we don't overthink much of what we're doing right now and over worry, because as a young professional, you're ambitious, you want to get ahead, you want to get stuff done. It's really easy to get consumed by what you're trying to do, particularly when you're in a highly competitive market space. And I would address minority candidates, for example, in the in the professions as well. There's a great deal of pressure on you to do certain things, to do it in a certain way, and to succeed. And you feel so much pressure, and that can be all consuming, and that can have impacts on your life in ways that you don't anticipate or necessarily recognize. So it's good to just try to stay grounded and to have a way to always step back and do some self-assessment, self-reflection, And always ask yourself, there's this three questions that I ask people to ask themselves is, what do I want? Why do I want it? And what am I willing to do for it? So at every point in time, recognizing that what we want can always change from time to time and should change from time to time. Our priorities do change, they evolve. But what do you want? Why do you want it? Why is it important to you? And what are you willing to do for it? If you're able to ask those questions, sometimes you might find out that what you want, and even with the understanding of why you want it, you're not willing to pay the price that you have to pay for that job. So sometimes maybe it's a new job, a promotion that requires you to go to the other end of the country. Are you willing to do that? Is it that important enough for you to get that next level job that you're going to disrupt your family life where you're at? Are you going to take this job now that's going to cut down on the time you're going to be able to spend with your kids and your spouse? Is it worth it to you? um, this job requires a certain certification or educational level. Are you willing to go back to school to get that? Is it important? So know what you want, why you want it, and what are you willing to do for it. It might not be worth the price, or it could very well be worth it. So I think just having that clarity is important.
I love that. I feel like you were talking to me in that moment, so I appreciate the advice.
Thank you.
Yeah, Bashir, it's been such a pleasure to have you on today. Any closing thoughts or anything you want to leave us with?
I would say let's keep learning, let's keep growing, and let's keep making an impact. Again, remember, how would you measure your life? Like Clay Christensen said, we should always think about what impact we're making on those around us, and all of us can make impacts. And I tell the young college students, I said, you can impact the kids in high school and kids in elementary school. You can absolutely impact them. You can be role models to them. So we should always think, what impact am I making? You don't have to be a Warren Buffett to be impactful. Each and every one of us can make impacts in whatever small sphere that we have access to. So let's be impactful in a good way.
I love that. Bashir, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you being on.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.